Hello and welcome to another podcast extravaganza where we talk about anything and everything. Last time it was Christmas. This time it is apologetics and cultural engagement. I am joined here with two other podcasts right now. I don't know if our third one is going to make it. But yeah, we've got David Pallmann here to my right, who is going to leave us very soon. This is his last broadcast as a co-host. So, David, how you doing, man?
I am doing well. Good to be on with, I guess, a final episode for hosting. But no, yeah, I'm doing well. A little bit sick, but it turns out it wasn't COVID, so I'm good.
All right. Next, we have Mr. Charles Graves. I really enjoyed Charles when we had a discussion with skeptics and seekers, and I was like, you know what, let's get questioning Christianity on here too. And my friend Caleb Johnson, he actually hosts both the Mentionables and questioning Christianity, so I'm able to just like go through him and get all these guys to come on and talk about this stuff. So Charles, man, say hi, man, and tell us a little.
I am. I'm really happy to be here, and Caleb is a great guy. He's our workhorse for our Question Christianity channel. I think we're really liking that. I think we're much newer to the YouTube world than you guys are. So happy to be here. Happy to do some learning and maybe pitch in a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, your contributions will be awesome. And third, we've got Real Seekers Ministries, and that's headed up by Dale Glover, good friend of mine. Dale, say hi.
Hey, David. Yeah, thanks for bringing me on to this special show to say goodbye to David Pallmann. I was telling them before the show that I thought Pallmann did a great job on the show and that sort of thing. So, yeah, you'll be missed. But, yeah, thanks for your service.
Yeah, so I'm also joined here with my new co-host, who is the man himself with the fedora. His name is Caleb Jackson. What's up, Caleb?
What's up? Yes, Caleb Jackson, not Caleb Johnston. I know I've gotten mixed up many times with him because I know that there's all the similarities. So it's great. Yeah, I'm great to be here. I'm going to be the new co-host replacing David. So I'm essentially him, but just with better theology. No, I'm kidding. But, that's certainly debatable. But yeah, and although I look like a Reddit atheist right now, I'm actually going to be co-hosting this theistic podcast. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, you know what's really cool is that, you know, you and Caleb have kind of like the same personality. You're both laid back and chill and strategic. So it's really cool to have you on as well. But I want to go to David real quick. Hey, David, tell us about what you're going to be doing and where you're going.
Yeah, so I'm going to be moving out to Illinois. I got work out there that I'll be doing, and I'm also going to be continuing my YouTube channel, Faith Because of Reason. So I'll still be putting out content, but not as regularly as I do over here. And I'm sure if I haven't completely worn out my welcome, once in a while, Caleb, with better theology and worse epistemology, will allow me to come back on periodically as a guest. Yeah.
I mean, you can come back on as a co-host if you want occasionally, like a guest host.
You know, what's funny though is that, like, David, you're giving up ministry here. I don't get it, man. I thought it was important to you to witness to the people of God, and not only to the people of God, but to the people that don't know God yet. You know, so you're trading in this, your theology for materialism here. I don't get it.
That's the way it goes, man. I mean, Nick Peters will be the first one to remind you that I'm the biggest of heretics. You know, he'll probably call me a hypocrite too. I mean, just talk to Cy Ten Bruggencay. I'm the biggest hypocrite in the world, so this shouldn't come as a surprise to you.
Well, speaking of being a heretic, I did put something together for you, and I just thought I'd share it with everybody, and we can all just look at it and see your progression over the years. And you know, it's everything has a season, and David, we understand it's time to grow up and get a real job and have real responsibilities and move out from mommy and daddy. So here you go, buddy. I got something for you, and I'm just going to hit the play button. So stand by and enjoy it.
Man, I don't even know the guy, and I'm getting misty-eyed. I'm crying. It's just the most touching thing.
I've never been so happy in my life.
Yeah. Well, there you
So,
go, David. We're gonna miss you.
The question is, did Nick Peters put you up to that? Is what I really want to know right now.
No, I've been planning this since you told me.
I can believe that.
Nick Peters
Caleb,
just
how
made
much
some
did
great
you play in that
contributions.
video?
He showed it to me. I actually didn't contribute anything. I just said, "Oh, that looks
I'm
good."
skeptical of that claim. I don't have a defeater for that belief at the moment, Caleb. Your claim is not a. I have a deflector defeater for that. So no.
Claims are not
I'm
evidence. Okay, claims are not evidence. So.
Dale, what did you think, man? Was that touching?
Oh yeah, very touching. Yeah. What I want to know is what percentage of that is true.
All of it.
100%.
All right, guys. So, I wanted to bring everybody on for this because I think it's important. We're talking about apologetics and cultural engagement, which means there's many aspects to this. It's a broad topic. And I want to go through like how we can do a better job. One of the stats that I listed was that it was Tom Bissett's book that came out in 1997, and it's only gotten worse from there. It hasn't gotten better, but people are leaving the church at a rapid pace. So how, as apologists, can we better engage and make this golden age of apologetics something that's actually doing a lot more than what it's doing? I know we're on social media, and we're doing it through here so far, but what are some other ways we can do that? And what do you have to say on apologetics and cultural engagement? Because obviously, like I said, it's a broad field, and we're going to have to divide it up. What does the apologist do? What is his role? What is his role in the church? What is his role in everyday life? What is his role in actually not only his family, but then going out to the streets and taking these apologetics to the streets and to the workplace and so forth? How can we look in the mirror every day and say, am I doing enough? And how do we satisfy ourselves saying, I am doing enough? I am presenting a defense for what I believe. And not only am I presenting a defense for what I believe, but I'm doing it with gentleness and respect, and I'm being persuasive. So that's kind of like the thrust for the night. So whoever wants to go first on that, let's divide it up into those subsections. Let's talk about the apologist first. What is he going to have to do? David, you got any ideas?
So kind of one thing that I think would be helpful for contemporary apologists to kind of focus on more, especially people kind of like us who aren't maybe out there as much like William Lane Craig would be, who's, he's got a very well-defined system, areas that he defends. I think that people like us could, it would be helpful if we kind of focused on maybe some of these more like niche areas. So like we have our own areas of interest, and other people have those areas of interest as well. And so one thing for myself when I was kind of getting into this is that there were I didn't have a hard time finding material, say, on the Kalam cosmological argument, right? Like everybody and their brother had done a presentation of that. So if you're going to have like a blog or something, don't do another article on the Kalam cosmological argument, because everybody's heard it before, and there are people who presented and defended it a lot better than you will. So I think it's helpful if we focus maybe on something that people haven't, covered, because something, for example, was like for me was Jesus mythicism. I was encountering Jesus mythicism everywhere, and when I tried to find responses to it, it was difficult. You could find places, they list you the same 5 or 10 ancient sources that talk about Jesus, but you weren't getting any kind of deep engagement with arguments from people like Richard Carrier and stuff like that. And I was interested in that, and I couldn't really find material on it. And so I think it would be helpful as apologists at the cultural level if we kind of would go after some of these other areas out there that people are interested in or talking about, and kind of engage that sort of thing, put something out there on the Christian side. And that's going to encourage us to be better read. So we're going to have a wider pool of knowledge. We're not just going to be knowing the same 5 or 6 arguments that everybody knows, and it will help us to kind of branch out. But ultimately, it will provide, I think, more answers, on a broader range of topics, and I think that would be helpful as far as cultural apologetics goes.
Right on, Charles. You got any tips or ideas on this?
Yeah, I was thinking along maybe similar or parallel lines, but when you said cultural engagement, I was just like, all right, let's dissect that. So we need to engage the culture. I mean, I know that sounds no-brainer, but part of that in living in this culture that is it's changing so quickly. I think one of our responsibilities as apologists is kind of staying up to date with what the culture is and what it's currently teaching, because stuff is moving so fast. And what might have been maybe even a solid argument or even a topic of discussion is like, it's now passé. And so I think just as part of the responsibility of the apologist is to know what the current cultural issues are and being able to address them. And I can't tell you how many times, just trying to stay up on podcasts or reading or whatever it is, like, gosh, I haven't heard that before. Oh my gosh, that's a new thing. Haven't heard that before. Okay, that's new. It's just like every week there seems to be some new issue, some new attack. And well, let me just say, we don't want to hear that the first time when we're engaging the culture, right? We want to be prepared for that. So there's just, it's kind of like a doctor's always reading medical journals. We want to stay up. And I think that's kind of what David was saying. Like, the Kalam, everyone's talking about it. I think both sides have heard it. What's new? How can we stay up to date and engage the culture for where the culture is? Because we got to meet the culture where they are.
Yeah, very good. Dale?
Yeah, I agree with what the two guests have said, with what Charles and David have said already as well. Like, I like the jack of all trades approach myself, but obviously you can have certain niches and have like an angle that's interesting and unique and stuff like that. So with my show, even though it's not evident because I have like random guest shows and stuff like that, and I'm still posting up old shows from SNS, but my format that I'm trying to do with Real Seekers is I have an 11 premise argument. That is what caused me to convert to Christianity. It's what led me to faith. And, I want to provide the warrant. I'm writing out a book for the warrant of each of those premises and that sort of thing. So that's kind of my angle to that's my approach to sharing apologetics. This is what worked for me, and I want to share that with people, and they can make whatever they want out of that. One thing beyond just social media and stuff like that, I struggle with interpersonal witnessing, like person to person. So I think that's something that we have to work with, especially because the culture is kind of against Christian values. There's what Dr. Tony Costa calls this transverse of values recently, where whatever a Christian thinks is good is automatically bad and stuff like that. So in order to counter, I think it's important to develop personal skills one-on-one and talking to people and listening first to what they have to say, what their opinions are, gaining that understanding of where they're coming from, and then, address it and where they're at and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's really important. Is let's not forget about even the one-on-one type of engagement.
Right. So you're not a street preacher, Dale?
I'm not, and that's not my style. Like, if I were to go on the street, I'd probably like set up a table and let people come to me or something like that. But yeah, I'm horrible at the person, like one-on-one conversations and stuff. So that's something I need to work on.
Right. Charles, you're saying?
I was just he said the one-on-one being important. I'd say, man, in this culture, that's just essential, because in this culture, what we have right now, that's funny. He said, whatever the Christian believes, it's automatically considered wrong. So in this culture right now, we do seem to be trending toward an area where dialogue is getting shut down. And so the more we can the idea of one-on-one conversation is incredibly subversive to that culture, because what we're saying is, I want to hear you out, and I'm more than willing to hear someone out first and get them to talk to me. That undermines that cancel culture that initiates dialogue, that says we have an exchange. That's what we want. We want the free exchange of ideas. Where else are we going to get if we can't even do that? So just having those one-on-one conversation is a subversive act to the present culture.
right? So we got to be relevant in a way, I think. Caleb, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of good points. I agree with both David and Dale that originality is important, and I do kind of internally cringe a little bit when I see just people. Not that I have an issue with the traditional formulas of like Craig, but you'll have them list the same points and the same things. It's just like, yeah, I get that, but like I think we can be better and a bit more. When you can start off that way, but I think as you get into apologetics, you should have a wider branch and get more specific and get more creative, which is why I like what Dale does with very niche things like the Shroud of Turin. I think that's not talked about a lot in apologetics. I still don't have a position on it, but the fact that I don't means that I don't think most people on either side have looked into it enough to have strong feelings towards it. And I was just doing this today with some of the posts where we were grading arguments for God's existence, and people were ranking ones I thought were good very low, and vice versa. Now, and Dave and I were like, oh wow, but we're surprised they didn't mention this one higher or something. So yeah, originality is important. Not to say that it has to be completely different, but at least I guess a different take or a different expression. Also, I think more importantly would be the idea that I don't think you can divorce apologetics from evangelism. And I don't think people intentionally do that, but I think far too often what we see is when people get into it, they'll see the William Lane Craig compilation of best debate moments and the mic drop moments that make everyone just laugh and makes the other person look stupid. And I don't think we should be necessarily wanting that. I think you should want at the end of the day to have a conversation to bring the person there, because you can win the argument, but if you're not saving their soul, what point does it make? Or at least someone who's watching. It doesn't have to be the person you're talking to if it's a debate, but just people watching the debate. But I think you should always be with the mindset of changing the person's mind, and you're called to do that as a Christian. And it's not really, you don't have people who's like, well, my specific job is to love my neighbor or to forgive my enemies. Like, nope, that's everybody's job. Everybody's supposed to give a defense. Everybody's supposed to love their neighbor. Everybody's supposed to spread the gospel. So although we have missionaries who do that specifically, that doesn't mean that you can't be doing that in your own life. And I'm going to be actually in 2 days, I'm leaving for the whole summer in New Jersey to be doing a mission trip, but I'll be back in August. So hopefully that'll play out there, and we'll see. But yeah, I think just emphasizing evangelism with apologetics in a good way, I hate to name names, but not like Ray Comfort and some other people, but in a more sophisticated, well thought out way.
Man, Caleb, that's the point about the mic drop is especially in this culture, again, so relevant, because what we have in this culture is a trend where their epistemology, their way of learning things, is their feelings. So if you get a mic drop moment, that just makes them dislike you, and then now you're wrong. It doesn't matter what you say, because they're getting this negative feeling for you. And actually, not that this should be our primary method, but it can work for us, where if we are not sacrificing the message, but trying what we can to be gentle and respectful and get positive motions, this culture tends to see that as truth, which is weird to me, but that's where they are. So super important. Great point.
Right on. Yeah, guys. Like, another thing is there's many cultures in this culture. It's not just one. We're in a melting pot, right? So, for me, the apologist has to take it to the church, right? Because not all churches are accepting of apologetics. There's a lot of pushback, right? So, how do we incorporate that in the church? And then you have like what the culture you're talking about, like the feel-good culture and the ones that will build up that wall. But then there's that other culture that is starving for answers, and when you talk to them, it's like a light bulb goes off, and they're just like, I've never thought about that before. And you're just dealing with all these subcultures within a big culture. And what can the apologist do besides being original and being relevant? I mean, what are some ways we can particularly make the church see that we are, we're relevant and we're needed? Because I think apologetics is probably needed more in the church now than ever. Like I said, I was quoting Tom Bessette's book, and, his number one issue was that people weren't getting answers. That was the number one question. I once went into our church, I had just started going to the church I'm at now, and they had what they called ask questions, or they had a little like thing where they basically introduced like some apologetics ideas, and it was the Alpha course they give you in Europe. And basically, I went in there as like the bird's eye view. I said, you know what, I want to see what these guys are about. I want to just kind of sit down and see, you know, what they're teaching and how they're going to go about this. And we had a group there, and one of the guys, he was an unbeliever, and he had several questions. And I noticed that, you know, the people that were running the Alpha course, they hit play on a button. That was it. They didn't know how to really answer those questions. So, you know, as being an apologist, I had to jump in at some point. And my daughter went with me, and she was like 14 at the time. And she was like nudging me to jump in, you know, because she was like, you know, and at the end of it, she was like, Dad, you knew more than everybody there. So I was like, it's not like that. What it is trying to really know what you believe and why. And I just kind of said, okay, guys, I'm an apologist, and you know, I came out and I was like, this is what I'm doing, and it turned out to be like a huge fruitful class, and this guy got answers that he wasn't getting before. So how do we present this to the church? How do we show them that, you know, hey, this is needed, and what can an apologist do in church?
So I think a lot of it, like there's this particular kind of situation that I've been thinking about recently, and that is that it's not churches that are, you know, that we're wanting the apologetics. So a lot of times it's individuals in the church. And so if you try to present it to sometimes some of the older and more rigid leaders of the church, you try to, you know, bring the need before them, they will want to reject it and say, well, you just need more preaching, you need the Bible, you need more faith, you know, the sorts of answers that we've heard before. And so it can be difficult to help like individual churches see the need for it. So fortunately, we are living in an age where it's easier for individuals in the church to sort of find this sort of information. But that's kind of a situation that I've been thinking about how to best deal with that kind of situation, because you know, on the one hand, you don't want to like go behind the pastor's back, right, of your church and start doing things that he doesn't approve of. But you know, on the other hand, if you know people who are struggling with the faith, and like the church just doesn't think apologetics is, you know, the way to go, on the other hand, you don't want to see that person fall either. So there are delicate situations like that, and I'm not sure if that's exactly the kind of situation you're wanting me to address, Russell, but
yeah, address any issue you want with it. Anybody else?
I was going to comment that I think when we're talking, I mean, you talked earlier about different cultures within it, and I agree with that. I think we need to be careful when we say terms like the church or culture, that we're not thinking so like ethnocentrically, because when we're talking about the church is dying and it's people are leaving it at record numbers, that's mostly in the West, in America and Europe, but we have to be careful to note that Christianity is actually growing at a very high rate in the third world, and especially Africa and Asia, in the Middle East. And so different tactics are going to be relevant to different cultures. Now, granted, we are all in the United States except for Dale, who's in Canada, but it's still the West, I guess. Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I feel like it's a completely different region, but, you know, generally speaking.
You're being racist, Caleb. You're being racist.
I am deeply offended right now.
I'm sorry. He'll apologize. He'll apologize anyway, though, because... anyway, oh shoot!
You just said that because he's Canadian.
Yes, exactly. That was the point. You just got me. Okay, but anyway, yeah, I think like this idea of like there's a specific way that apologetics has to go. I'm all for apologetics. I think it's very useful in the West and in our culture, and we should be advocating for it. But just to have that little asterisk there, that footnote of like, you know, this might not be applicable to everyone, because, you know, in Africa and Asia, people converting to Christianity are not sitting down talking about the Kalam cosmological argument. They're doing it because they saw Jesus in a dream or a vision, or because they were healed instantly after prayer. I mean, that's the main cause of church growth in the third world. So I think we just have to keep in mind that different cultures have different methods, and that we shouldn't pick one over the other per se, but that we just need to look at the context and then figure out the method. So that was just a little caveat I wanted to add.
Yeah, amen to that. And so talking about cultures within cultures, I mean, if you take that view, which I think is correct, you can continue to break down the culture and the subculture, and inevitably what you end up with is individuals. And I think it's really important to recognize that. So when you're talking to someone, you shouldn't view yourself like, okay, I'm an apologist, I'm talking to an atheist, so I'm going to use X, Y, and Z because that's their category, that's their culture, this is my culture. That is not going to ring true with anyone. Well, I don't want to say that because, but the point is, you really want to have, again, this one-on-one individual, genuine conversation. I think the more genuine it is, where you're really trying to understand who the person is, what they're like. Questions are great. I mean, I'm first time on this podcast, but I'm sure you guys have talked about tactics maybe once or twice. I don't know if that's ever come up, right? So ask questions, like genuinely seek. People are so interesting, and if you just like flush that out, man, they will just gush. They'll tell you their whole life story, and great. And then you can kind of interject, like, what did you come from a Christian background? What was it like for you? Did you ever have any experiences, spiritual experiences? Where are you on life and death? As an individual, not with an agenda and a checklist. That's I think where the power is, and that I think would also play true for the church. When you're in a church where maybe some of the leadership seems somewhat hostile, I can virtually guarantee you they're not all equally hostile in all the equally same areas, right? They're individuals, and they're going to have different views, have individual conversations, see where that individual person is, have a genuine conversation, go from there. What else can you do?
Yeah, that's a good point, Charles. I would also note that not bring up spiritual experiences in front of David Pallmann, because he'll just ask you the warrant of it. So
okay, well, I'm still wondering what bone crusher what is that?
I don't even know what that means,
already. I haven't been here. I'm like, is he going to crush my bones?
Right on.
Whose bones do you want me to crunch?
Dale, you got anything to say on that?
Yeah, I really resonate with what Charles was saying in terms of the culture. Again, it goes back to that being willing to do one-on-one, sincere, genuine conversations, being willing to listen and taking an interest in what they're interested in. Like again, I'm not a pro at the one-on-one thing, but I've had some good conversations with a Hindu, as well as a Sikh. I took the time to kind of like ask them about their things and then research it, and then I would ask what I thought were like sincere, intelligent questions, and wanted to hear their answers and stuff like that before I would even bring up my own beliefs and get their opinions on that. So like, yeah, I was genuinely wanting to hear why do they believe what they believe on various issues and stuff like that. So yeah, I put in the effort to research what their culture is, what their religion is, and that sort of thing. And yeah, that helped. In terms of within the church, so yeah, believe it or not, this is again something that I'm not a pro at, and it's because my church is actually presuppositionalist, hardcore 1689 London Baptist Confession Calvinists. So they hate.
David can relate. Pallmann can relate.
My pastor hates apologetics. He doesn't want anything to do with it. He doesn't want it in his church, and I respect his authority, kind of thing. So I just, if somebody comes up to me one-on-one, which nobody does, but if they did, I would deal with them one-on-one. I ask questions. He's good about allowing me to ask probing or challenging questions to some of the stuff that he's teaching. So that's sort of my extent, what I'm able to do without going behind his back and saying, here, take Apologetics 101 and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I don't know. I think I would listen to like David Pallmann or what others have to say about that. But yeah, I do have a question related to what we were talking about before. If I'm allowed to ask that after everyone.
Of course, you can ask it right now.
Okay, so I understand we were all kind of saying when we're doing apologetics one-on-one and stuff like that, 1 Peter 3:15, defend the faith with gentleness and respect and everything like that. I'm just sort of curious, is there any place for a different approach, like a harsh approach and stuff like that? So certainly Jesus, he called people vipers and snakes or stuff like, or hypocrites and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering, for the Christians on the panel, if we're dealing with people as individuals, is there ever a time where a Christian apologist can speak to someone in a little bit more of a harsh tone? Is that ever useful or no?
I mean, I think, yeah, there are a time for it, and you got to be careful with that, because there are certainly people who want to, who will easily abuse that. And I think there's also a point here about kind of the culture that you're in with that sort of tactic. So you'll notice, like, if you see kind of how Christian apologists who are kind of involved with Muslims act, if you watch like David Wood and Apostate Prophet, Apostate Prophet isn't really an apologist, but in any case, people like that, they take a very different tone against Islam than, say, somebody like William Lane Craig will take against atheism. And at first, I was like kind of shocked, honestly, about kind of almost what seemed like how rude they were being towards the Muslims. But at least from what I understand, as they explain it at any rate, that is actually what the Muslims expect. That's what they respond to. Because if you're just sit back like a nice person and try to reason with them, that they think that, you're either just don't care about it, or that you're not intelligent, not to be taken seriously, something like that. So they actually tone up the rhetoric on purpose because of the kind of person that they're dealing with. And so I think a similar principle can apply to us. And again, we have to be very careful because of the culture we're in. You don't want to come off as rude and condescending, but with some people, there is going to be warrant for acting different in how you are approaching the issue. So yes, there can definitely be situations where it's appropriate to be harsher because of the culture we're in. You need to be very careful about when and like in what context you're going to employ a harsher sort of condemnation, or I don't even know if you call it an apologetic, but for lack of a better word, a harsher sort of apologetic. So yes, there is a time and place for it, but be very careful about employing it.
Yeah, I would say.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Charles. No, go ahead.
So I absolutely agree that there is a time and place, and absolutely we have to use wisdom. And so then the trick is, well, when? And I maybe the rule that I try to, or the wisdom that I try to follow is, I'm trying to do the greatest good. And, I can never do perfectly good, so I'm trying to do the greatest good. So in your example of the Muslims, they definitely have a deference and a respect to someone who's speaking boldly. So the person is speaking like that because they're trying to do the greatest good in the situation they are in. And my guess is, so I wouldn't say this absolutely, my guess is that Jesus, in the situations where he's calling people a brood of vipers, it's like he's trying to do the greatest good in the situation that he was in at the time, which is he had some very obstinate people and there were other people listening. So, you have to take that into account. I'm not just talking to a person in a crowd. Other people are listening, and I have to speak boldly. And maybe what this person is to kind of be confronted with how they're acting. Again, you have to use wisdom, but just as a general rule, whatever that wisdom is, we are trying to do the greatest good and bring the most glory to God. So maybe sometimes that can take a strange turn.
Yeah, guys, I've always been a fan of relational apologetics, and I've presented that in several aspects to people I know and leaders to the church. And they seem to respect that, because I've always held to the moniker that people want to know how much you care before they care how much you know, right? So that's like one of the biggest things that drove me. But I think, when it comes to your question, Dale, you have to know your audience, man. That's crucial. That's one of the classes was one of the things that our instructors told us in classes. You got to know your audience. And that's a big deal. So you have to know when you have to lay it on a different way and give some tough love, because I believe this in ministry, there's a time for nurturing and there's a time for tough love, and that's Yeah, and that's the same in apologetics, you know. So there's going to be different approaches that you take with certain people, and you have to know that person, and that only comes by relationship. When you're going out and evangelizing, and you're just ready to give a defense for anyone that acts, you know that term "anyone" to me really gives me a sense of just like random people coming to you off the street asking you questions. So you're going to be gentle, you're going to be respectful, you know. So you know, and of course that, you know, being gentleness and respect and stuff like that applies to everything. I'm not saying it doesn't, but there is that notion where, like, if a random person comes up that you may not know, you know, like Paul at the Areopagus, you know, on Mars Hill, you know, he didn't know all those people, so he presented, you know, what he presented there. So again, you know, I always go with that mindset of people want to know how much you care before they care how much you know. So I try to go at it in that way. So that's my answer.
Well,
Yeah, I'm good. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Caleb.
Well, no, I was just going to say I don't necessarily disagree, but I would, maybe just my personality, I don't know, but I typically am more laid back, and I try to be more patient, because I think what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 5:12 is important. Of, for what have I to do with judging outsiders? Is it not those inside the church whom you are to judge? So I think that rebuke is perfectly acceptable within people in the church, but why should you expect non-Christians to act like Christians or to follow Christian principles? It's just ridiculous, right? I'm not going to get upset with a person who's in sin if they're not a Christian, because why should they care? I think you have to have that understanding of Christianity before you can start talking about sin in that way. So I just don't see why we should hold unbelievers to like a similar standard when they don't know any better. You know, how can he condemn those who don't know? But of course, we can rebuke, I think, within the church, especially even more harshly, people who should know better. But at the same time, I don't. Maybe it's just my. I wouldn't say I'm completely illiterate with Islam. What was that?
Oh, sorry, I was talking to my dog.
Oh,
I thought I was
good.
muted. My apologies.
That's cute. No, but yeah, I think there's maybe a certain level you could go with different people of different cultures, but when you're like some of the Christian apologists who, you know, like David, when you take a Quran and you make an origami of a pig, at that point I feel, or you have a cat walk over it, I feel like at that point you're just almost being a troll. And it's almost like the equivalent of the Church of Satan, which is basically just edgy atheists trying to be as offensive as possible. It's just like you're not adding anything intellectual to the conversation. You're just trying to be as offensive as possible just to get attention. And I just don't think that's a good strategy. I think you're just going to turn people off, and they're not going to want to talk to you. And that's just not. I don't think it's how Jesus did it. And I don't think that him calling the Pharisees vipers was necessarily analogous to that particular instance.
And for the record, I do think that David Wood goes way too far sometimes with some of the antics that he does on his channel. So I wasn't saying that I approve of absolutely everything he does. I was just trying to say that it's somewhat more understandable why he takes the method of apologetic that he does towards Muslims, given the way that Muslims are and think in those cultures. But I wasn't, saying that everything he does is right. What I wanted to say about Russell's point before was that I think one thing to kind of keep in mind is that when you are interacting with other people, it's very much an opportunity for you to learn as well. Because this is kind of one thing that when I was first getting into apologetics is I think I had a kind of an incorrect idea about what it meant to be an apologist. I thought that the apologist's job is to present, the case for Christianity. And of course, there's a time for that. And unfortunately, I think that's really bolstered by apologetic material because, if you watch videos of apologists, you see debates, you read their books, they're always presenting. And so you get the idea that that's what it's your job to do. And there's a time where it is. But what's kind of interesting is if you look at I forget what the reference was, but yes, the verse that Dale, I think it was Dale quoted before, it says to be ready to give a defense But when somebody asks, so there is actually very much a relational aspect there, and you're normally going to have to build a relationship with a person, and it's an opportunity for you to learn about the person, and they will learn about you. And at such time that they're interested, then they will express that interest. They will ask you, and that's when you're supposed to be ready to give the defense. So there is a time for presenting, but most people, just not like walking down the street hoping that somebody's gonna slam them with a logical argument for God's existence. Normally, you've got to get to know people, and most of the time, for most people, I mean, you don't have to even present it as a syllogism. Normally, I find actually I get further with them if I'm not presenting it as a logical syllogism, and they're just kind of like, so why do you believe in God? And so I'll give the argument, they can follow the logic, but I don't have to present it as like this cold, hard syllogism. So I'm not saying there's not a time to be logically rigorous. Of course there is, but generally, if you're engaging in like a conversational sort of apologetic with someone, presenting a syllogistic argument is more than often doesn't help the conversation, in my experience.
Always start with the ontological argument, right? You can never go wrong.
That's it, man. That's it.
Yeah. Actually, what's even better is don't even just tell them they already know God exists and that they're just suppressing the truth and righteousness. That's the further
God reveals
best strategy,
so
right? Yes, exactly.
That's David's way. Dale, anything on that?
No, I was just going to say, perfect. Thank you guys so much for your very thoughtful answers. I think I agree with everything you guys said. I can't think of one thing I was disagreeing with. So, yeah, it was excellent advice that you guys give. I guess the only thing I would just add is this keyword edification. Whoever you're interacting with, know your audience and that sort of thing, and build these relational apologetics, as David Russell was saying, and make sure whatever you're doing, whatever approach you think is appropriate for that person, that you're doing it for the edification of that person and or others. And if you have an audience in social media standpoint, like people listening and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's the only thing I would add, is remember that word edification. You're trying to edify the other person.
So, and Dale, you can speak to this here in a minute, because I was gonna the reason I brought up this whole topic on cultural engagement is because, I know what Caleb was saying about churches, overseas, but we're dealing with our culture. We're dealing with the West. So, of course, you're going to take a different approach in the East. But what do we do when a church is so anti-apologetics? I mean, is it time to move on? Is it time to, here's my idea, because I think it's so vitally important that we have it now because of the way the skepticism is in our country and the way that the relativism, has swept in, and the whole ideas of materialism. And coffee shops in America used to be places where theology was talked about openly. Mm-hmm. Now everybody's just on their phone, or, they're scared to even talk about it. And there's a lot of people that just don't know it. So, it's crazy that, we live in this culture where these big questions that have always been with us are not even discussed. So back to the church culture, how do we deal with a church culture that is so anti-apologetics? Because, like, for example, right now I want to create for my church at least a lesson plan that I can present, because a lot of people like they like plans that actually they can look at and say, okay, here's the structure of the plan. This is what you got. This is your material. Yes, you can do this. They don't like you giving them ideas without any like solutions. You know what I mean? So provide somebody with a solution, or provide your pastors with a solution with even if it's just basic apologetics, and enough that they can say, okay, you have like a 5-week class here. Talk about this, and this on Saturday nights, and we'll make an event. You know what I mean? So like, how do we do that? So and how? Well, I know that's what I'm doing, but like, you know what I mean? How do you do this when you just have that much resistance to apologetics?
Yeah, so that's very difficult. So at least in your situation, your church, even though it's kind of apologetic resistant, at least it's giving you an opportunity to be a teacher and to change some minds. And
Well, yeah, mine's not really resistant. I haven't presented them with anything. Yes, I just have that mentality of like let's give them a solution before we just talk about the problem type deal.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, so you're way ahead in terms of my situation. There's just I'm not allowed to be a teacher. I'm not even an official member unless you agree to the 1689 London Baptist Confession kind of thing. So like. There's literally nothing I can do personally to like, teach people or something like that, like without violating the rules or something like that. So I'm kind of similar. Richard Lucas, I don't know if you guys know him. He debated Shabir Ali on the numerical patterns in the Quran and stuff like that. But he's sort of in a similar boat. He's a non-Calvinist. He goes to a presuppositionalist Calvinist church. I guess in my case, you can just kind of discuss. You just got to discuss with the pastor and work with him or the elders and that sort of thing, and understand the differences in the teaching philosophy, and say, look, I can work with you and stuff like that to ensure that I'm not pushing one agenda or my view or the other. I can teach pretty neutrally both sides and let the students decide what they think is true. But at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the pastor if they're going to let you do that. If they do let you do that, then yeah, I would say make it a collaborative process. Like, take the fear out of them. Like, we're afraid that you're going to teach them stuff and they're going to leave and stuff like that. Like, make sure that you're including the pastor, the people that are hesitant about the use of apologetics, so that they understand what it is and why you're doing it and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Well, I'd like to. That was kind of the thought that I had when you said, what is it? I think a lot of churches that are hostile to the idea of apologetics, you say that word and, that triggers all kinds of things in their mind. And, the word apologia, it really just means like an answer back or, an argument for it. And that could be some type of natural theological argument, but it could also it could literally be the gospel. If someone says, what's your only hope in life and in death? That's not a natural theological answer. That's just, Jesus Christ, and my hope after life is in Christ. That's an answer back. So you're certainly in a hard situation, Dale, and I wouldn't try to assume that I have all the answers for you, but perhaps for you or maybe for someone else, just unpacking that word and just trying to get them to say, like, I want what you want. I want people to come to Christ. That is my number one goal. And that might take several forms. That might be a purely theological answer back. It might be a mix. It might be something in between. It might be natural theology. But I'm just trying to give someone an answer if they ask me why I believe in Christ, and I want to give them an answer. And depending on the individual that I'm talking to, that who knows what that answer is going to be? Who knows what the question is going to be? I just want to be prepared.
Right. Dale, you got anything else to add on that?
No, I think that was great. Yeah, thanks, Charles. Yeah, it's a tough situation, that sort of thing. Teaching is something that's important to me. Like I asked straight away, I want to participate in church activities and stuff like that and get involved. But yeah, at the same time, I respect that this is their fundamental position. I'm not going to go behind their back kind of thing. I'm available if anybody, they know that I've got a podcast, I let them know that I'm available if they want to ask questions and that sort of thing.
Well, look, can I ask you something, Dale?
Sure.
Is there something that you could teach that they would find agreeable?
So I think it's, so not with the pastor, because he thinks once, so we sort of had a situation where we had one guy who is an up-and-coming apologist, and he went through PhD studies. He was actually known as the next James White in some apologist circles, and he became a Catholic. So this has really got them scared of like scholarship.
Fear. That's interesting. Okay, so their motivation sounds like it's fear.
I think so. Again, that's me just reading. Yeah.
I'd hit that head on. I would totally acknowledge their fear. I'd be like, man, you guys man, it sounds like you had a bad experience. I don't want that either. The last thing I want is for anyone to be converted to Catholicism, especially because of my teaching. But I mean, and I wasn't, when I said, is there anything you could teach? I meant maybe even beyond apologetics, at least for the beginning. Maybe could you just teach like a Bible study, like through? I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just I'm brainstorming here. But can you gain some trust by just teaching through 1 Peter or 2 Peter or Matthew or anything, just so they can see, this guy?
I think they said they wouldn't let him teach at all because he doesn't affirm one of the confessions. So like, unless you're
disqualified,
unless you're already affirming this in-group document,
Yeah, and it's not like privileges. It's not like Dale can leave that church anyway because they don't have very many in Canada anymore.
It is true that they're closed.
That's the kind of church that survived. I mean, no offense, Dale, but like, if churches are smart, it's. I just have to say, it's very unfortunate that a presuppositionalist Calvinist church is the one that's surviving. Sorry, that's just my.
David, Seitan Bruggencate is from Canada. Okay, so that should tell you the kind of apologists that they're cranking up.
It doesn't mean he has to wield influence there.
I know.
Well, the influence is you. You're snuggling quite close to him in that picture.
Apparently, yeah.
Yes, that's totally not photoshopped picture.
Yeah, that wasn't the only person Cy was snuggling next to, but I won't get into that.
If you can't honestly affirm their statement of belief, or you can't teach until you do that, I think again the best thing I could do is I would want them to tell me every single fear. Like I would just want to like suck the pump dry. Like, tell me everything you're scared about, and at least so I could hear it. I might not even have a response. It's like, tell me everything you're worried about. Again, I know I've heard it before, or I'd read it back. It sounds like you're worried about this, and it sounds like you're worried about this. Let them at least, at the very least, let them at least know that you have fully heard their concern and you understand it, and so they know. At least they know that you've heard them, and maybe that's all you can do, but it might be a start.
Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, I'll actually do that right away. Yeah, because I think that's great advice. That's the best you can do, kind of thing. Is
fear's a hard one to overcome. I mean, because it's scary, right? Fear is scary, and I don't think you're going to make any progress with anyone in church or out of church when that person is scared. And so that's again back to the one-on-one conversations. You got to have these genuine. I'm going beyond your church scenario, but just in general, you want people to be comfortable. No one's going to come to Christ because you bullied them or you got a gotcha moment. I think we do have to have good arguments, but people have to feel comfortable. They have to feel safe. I hate to say it in this culture because it's over, but we don't want to shy away from a culture that's over focused on safe and say, well, we're never going to be safe. People have to feel safe in a conversation to get anywhere. And what that generally means specifically is you have to hear their fears out, and you have to okay, it sounds like you're worried about this. Sounds like you're worried about that. Read it back to them.
Yeah.
And I think what Dale and Charles are kind of hitting on here is sort of close to the root of what anti-apologetics among Christians stems from. I think it comes from, and again, no offense to anyone, but I think it does come from kind of an intellectual immaturity, and this idea that this is why you still got people like in my personal church, they never go into deep doctrine or anything. Even the sermons for the adults, the adult Sunday school class, it feels like a very devotional level type of sermon, and that's all they do. And I think it comes from this viewing of people that they are not or should not be going deeper in these things. And what's interesting is that is radically unbiblical. So if you look in the New Testament, people we're not just told to bring people to Christ. We're told to ground them in sound doctrine. People are told to be learning, right? I believe it was Paul. I think it was to Timothy. He told him to give attention to reading. The idea is not that you get saved and then you just bam, go turn your brain off. The point is after you become a believer, the New Testament, you're supposed to grow and you're supposed to learn, and you're not supposed to. My sheep. Right, you're not just supposed to get saved and then. It'll go right into ministry. there's a time where you're supposed to grow and learn these things, and the teachers are supposed to be people who are mature. And by mature, I don't just mean like you were like a sponge who soaked up everything that somebody told you. You should be a well-rounded, a well-read person who knows what's going on. We know everyone can't master everything. Pastors are busy. I get that, but you should have like at least the right sort of way of thinking about things, and not every new opinion that comes along, new way of doing things is, that's bad, that's against the way that I've learned to do it. And so I think that's the real root of the problem, is that people, they have this view of their congregants, like their job is like they're the shepherd, they're supposed to protect them. And yes, that's true, but I think part of protecting them is also equipping them. You don't you don't protect them by keeping them stupid. That's not what the New Testament teaches you to do. They are to learn, they are to go on, they're to become mature. And so that, I think, is really, that's the root problem that anti-apologetics stems from.
Yeah. I was in a church one time, and I was kind of a new member of this church, and I got a chance to talk to the pastor, and I mentioned the fact that I liked apologetics, and as soon as I said that word, he goes, "Oh yeah, how old do you think the Earth is?" And I was like, and I'm an old Earth guy, right? And so it's like, well, I think the Earth is, probably older than typical New Earths, and I was trying to be very diplomatic. He was hostile to me teaching the whole time, because I think he was scared that I was going to get in there and teach everyone that the Earth is really old. It's like, I don't really care that much about I mean, I have my personal feelings on that, but I mean, I don't have a bone to pick with young Earthers.
Next thing you know, they'll be saying the Earth is round. I mean.
But I mean, it was that fear, right? That he had that fear that here's oh my gosh, he's an old earther. I've heard about these apologists. They're gonna next thing you know, he's gonna be teaching X, Y, and so.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. I didn't help my situation, because I now believe that the early chapters of Genesis are mytho-history. Since you guys brought that up, obviously, this is a young Earth creationist church and that sort of thing. So like,
are they watching right now?
They are. Maybe, I don't know.
They are too busy watching Ken Ham right now.
Probably. Well, yeah, they love Ken Ham. We've got a library full of his books and stuff like that. But
just side note, that amazes me. That like when young Earthers have people like Paul Nelson that they could be turning to, I have tons of respect for Paul Nelson. He's like a really smart young Earth creationist, that they want to like turn to somebody like Ken Ham. But go ahead.
Of all the people, like, you at least have good people in your camp, and you're picking the worst ones. But
yeah. So yeah, like that's an essential issue for them. That, again, you're out kind of thing.
So interesting. It's like, why is that so important? But I don't want to beat up, but it does seem kind of odd. It's like, why is that the number one thing? Like, how about now? I mean, if we're talking about, did Jesus actually rise from the dead? Like, okay, let's beat the heck out of that one. That one matters. Age of the Earth. I'm not going to say it's like unimportant, but like on the scale of important things, it's fallen pretty low down. Like, I love my young Earth brothers, absolutely. They take their scriptures seriously. I love that they take it seriously. Maybe they think I don't, but I take my scriptures pretty seriously too. So maybe we could dialogue about that. But man, as a disqualifier, that one, I rehearse that conversation in my mind 1,000 times, but
I agree with Daniel's. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Daniel.
No, it's mention Daniel first.
Yeah, no, Daniel commented. I'm assuming everyone can see it who's watching. They should sneak Ben Stanhope. Ben Stanhope's I think a friend of most of us. Yeah, there you go. His new book. He's writes a whole bunch of stuff on Genesis. I believe he has a master's in Near Eastern Hebrew studies, something relevant to the Old Testament. And he writes a lot about how the creation museum misinterprets all that stuff. So that's just that reference to that. But yeah, I think that like the whole point about like discovery is what scares people, because it's almost like in the Wizard of Oz, when it's like the person behind the curtain. It's like, if you don't want to know, you don't want to ruin the illusion and maybe peek and see something that's going to mess it up for you. Maybe a better analogy would be if everyone's seen the Truman Show with Jim Carrey, where his whole life is a movie set, but he thinks it's real. And then one day a light falls down in front of him. I think everyone's going to have the moment where a light falls down. No, you're going to have that moment where a stage light falls in front of you the first time you hear about evolution or something that you've never been exposed to because you've been shielded your whole life, and it's just gonna stick with you, and you can either ignore it or you can say, well, hold on, something's not right here, and explore it. But I think keeping up the illusion instead of facing off front of, oh yeah, here's all the stuff and here are the answers, and go explore it and come to your own conclusions. I think that's much more epistemically responsible than trying to shield people away and discourage. I think any group that discourages people reading outside material is highly questionable at that point. That's a red flag right there. If they're like, oh, don't read so and so. No, if anything, read them and then see if you can refute their argument. But not reading them is the worst thing you could do, because then you're just not familiar with it.
Gotcha. Yeah. This will be my last thing to say on it. But you guys just gave me a great thing that maybe could help or something like that. So in the first place, I just want to make sure I'm not misrepresenting them. He does engage in scholarship. He knows Greek and stuff like that. But it's just what Caleb was saying. Like, only one side can be presented. You can't. Like, I remember on the Calvinism-Molinism debate, I was having a conversation with him, and I sent him like a William Lane Craig DVD. He was just, I just laughed at him. He's he doesn't know what he's talking about and stuff like that. So there's just no engagement. He's like, no, you can't look at those guys. So that's the issue. But
2 PhDs, philosophy and theology, but he has no idea what he's talking about.
Well, even from a scriptural standpoint, how familiar was Paul with the modern Greek thought at the time? He's basically in Mars Hill. He's basically saying, look, I understand your culture. He's actually quoting, what is it? I can't think of it, but he's quoting Greek authors, playwrights at the time, and bringing that into his letters and his sermons. So he's obviously read some of the opposing arguments, and he's bringing it in and recontextualizing it and strengthening the church by doing that. Yeah.
This was my just for the sake of the audience. I think what I'm learning from you, another thing that could work if you're in the same situation, for an edifying purpose, is okay. Let's have a discussion about what's essential and what's not. How do we determine which doctrines are essential and that sort of thing? Because I remember I even asked my pastor at one time, and he had the same list. But then there's this disconnect where it's like later on, well, if you're not a young earth creationist, that's essential or something. It's like, maybe that could help.
I forgot the verse in the Bible that says that, but if you confess with your mouth and admit the world is 6,000 years old, then you'll be saved. I think that's
then you will be saved.
Right? Yeah, there you
go. What's funny is because I went to one of these fundamentalist Bible colleges for 2 years before they threw me out, and one of the books we had to read there was called Why Baptist, and so it was a Baptist school. And what was interesting to me as I kind of read the introduction to the book is that some people who think this way, they don't have any appreciation for a distinction that existed among early Christians. And this is a distinction between essential and non-essential doctrines. Now, they were aware of it, the authors of this book, and they explicitly rejected it. They said, the Bible doesn't say anything about, non-essential doctrines. So basically, anything that the Bible said, and there was no room here for that. They are interpreting what the Bible says. Anything was that what the Bible says, you have to affirm that in its entirety. And if you deviate at any point from the Bible, parentheses, my interpretation of the Bible, then you're effectively denying it. And so that's how they got this kind of all or nothing perspective on things. And Dale, I'm not saying that's the situation at your church there, but this is kind of the mindset that underlies a lot of it. And that's kind of the funny thing is that that's indicative of fundamentalism, but paradoxically, fundamentalism, the very word, presupposes that there are certain fundamentals that a person should be holding to that are distinct from all of your particulars. And if you got to have that, if you're not gonna say that everyone who doesn't read the Bible the same way as you is not saved or isn't a heretic or something like that, you have to realize that there are certain essential things, and traditionally these have been matters that are crucial to the doctrine of salvation, right? So obviously you have to believe in the deity of Christ and things like that. But there's a distinction between those sorts of doctrines and something like that the Bible frankly doesn't even talk about, which is how old the earth is, right? Maybe you can infer that from genealogies, right? Let's just say that you could. The Bible's not teaching it, and it's certainly not teaching it about doctrine of salvation. So have whatever opinion you want on these issues. Hold them as strongly as you want. Defend them till kingdom come. That's great. That's fine. To a point, I even think that's healthy. Although on that particular issue, I think sometimes people spend too much time there. But the point being is that, yes, there's a distinction there between the essential and the non-essential. And so it is important to have the conversation about it, because the logical conclusion of you rejecting that distinction between the essential and the non-essential is that everyone who ends first you become the authority of what is orthodoxy, and then everyone who disagrees with you becomes a heretic. And I don't think anyone wants that conclusion.
Man, David, Satan loves nothing better than when we confuse those two things. When we make the unessentials essentials, or when we make the essentials unessential. It's like best heresies in the world spring from those things.
Huh. It's no, I think that's a good point. And I think where they get a lot of that fundamentalist ideology is in Revelation, where it says, be either hot or cold. If you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out of my mouth.
Gosh, so we gotta take that stuff in context, man.
What's context? I don't know.
Right. That's a very important question.
Context.
Yeah.
It's
I think you guys.
Context in Genesis.
I think you guys hit. Yeah, I think you guys hit the nail on the head here too. Is that we have to know, even the apologists, as the apologists, we have to know what we're talking about. We have to know the subject. We have to know the stuff. That we're putting out. So, like what Dale said earlier, I really liked, which was the jack of all trades approach. I think that we all have to be a jack of all trades, but specialize in a few things, but we do need a general knowledge, and that helps us do apologetics well, which I think that's kind of what this leads back to, because there are people that like apologists that don't know how to do, or apologetics, but don't know how to do apologetics well. Why? And there could be many different reasons for that. So, yeah, I mean, like things like context and so on, we have to understand what we believe and why before we can even get out there. So that's why, like, I favor this type of approach where, like, yes, you have to learn it, you have to love it, then you have to live it. And with those things, you can then begin to present it, whether it's in the church or in the culture.
Yeah. And it's really important, again, to emphasize there that the Bible presupposes that is supposed to take place, that people who are not mature in the faith, people who are recently converted, these are not to be the ones who are the apologists and the teachers. You're supposed to have the mature Christians fulfilling that role. So you can learn to be an apologist, but yes, you're not going to read one book and be ready to take it to the streets. It's not the way it works. And I think a failure to appreciate that point is honestly why you do have people who aren't intellectually mature, unfortunately, in a lot of church leadership, because that was allowed to take place, because we didn't follow the biblical model in a lot of cases.
Right.
So the first time I've heard him use the word presupposes in a positive way.
I caught that.
Yeah. I was like, oh wait, it's a good thing. Yeah, and it's just also like that seems historically to me to be like how Christianity has gone about. Some of the earliest patristic writings are Dialogue with Trypho by Justin Martyr and Origen's Contra Celsum, both of which are apologetic responses to Judaism and to paganism, which were criticizing Christianity. So they didn't just sit there and just say, no, y'all are wrong. Like they went point by point. Okay, here's what they are saying. Here's our response. So they're giving you both sides of the argument, but that's how they were doing it back then. And they were much closer to the apostles than we were. So I don't know why you would, I don't know what point that would have stopped. Like, at what point in time do we cut that off and we don't need it anymore? I just don't see that being anywhere in Christian history where people just stopped doing that. That seems how it always was going on.
I think a lot of it came from a misunderstanding and even misapplication of the doctrine of sola scriptura. So that's why you get people now who are like opposed to Bible commentaries and opposed to scholars. And, I just need my Bible and the Holy Spirit to understand what the text means. It's come from a gross misunderstanding of doctrines like sola scriptura, perspicuity of scripture. And of course, there's history to it with, the fundamentalist modernist divide that you had take place. And so that spread off a whole bunch of weird animals that mostly only exist in the United States. But the point being...
So they don't want Bible commentaries, but they're okay with people translating it. So if they want to read it in the original Greek with the Holy Spirit, go ahead. Let's see how far you get without the good scholarship. But
Right.
exactly. So I mean, it just seems like you're kind of picking and choosing here, unless we have, of course, the King James Bible, which we don't need any other translation because that is God's infallible word right there. Is the King James translation.
1611 King James.
Yes, 16. Not even New King James.
Third edition. Third edition.
Gotta be 1611 King James.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, so like we're wrapping it up now, and I kind of want to focus on like what are some things that you guys think that you could do better in presenting apologetics, and kind of the ways we've described. What are some things that you could do that you think you could do better, even So that's my question to you guys. I told you my little theory about presenting.
Well, I'll tell you what I've kind of slacked up on, just to be honest. You mentioned, gosh, I can't remember. Someone said that 1 Peter 3:15 mentions the specific thing of when you're asked. But I do think we can create opportunities. So I used to be a lot more active, and maybe it's the COVID stuff, but maybe I'm kind of using that as an excuse. But I know that our group used to be much more active about going to create opportunities. I think we can go out there, and we've gone to what we called the color parade, which was basically a gay celebration or LGBTQ, whatever you want to call it. But we'd go there, and we'd go there open, and we would just kind of do some of the things we were talking about, which is we'd go out there with questionnaires and say, look, here's some questions. I just want to hear your side. Maybe you want to hear mine, maybe you don't, and that's okay. But just whatever it is, being active about creating opportunities. I have really slacked off on that, and I think there's just, whether it's with a group or individual, trying to intentionally create opportunities. That's different than pushing. I'm not saying we're going to push on this. Just being active about finding ways to create opportunities. So I could definitely improve on that.
Absolutely. I think we all could. Dale.
Yeah, so I kind of already mentioned the area that I want to work on is that, again, that one-on-one and being good at like, okay, which strategy is going to be the most edifying for this specific person that I'm dealing with, kind of thing, rather than, with podcasts, it's just mass audience kind of thing. So you do a general strategy that will work for the most people and that sort of thing. But yeah, getting on that one-on-one level is the area I'd like to develop the most.
Right on. Pallmann.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I could say for myself, but kind of one that I guess I'm thinking of is I think I could improve the quality of the research that I do, and this is something that became particularly evident to me kind of as I reflected on some of the earlier videos I did on my channel, especially my series on evolution and the theory of intelligent design. So I think I was pretty well studied in intelligent design literature at the time that I made that, but I also think I way overstated my case. And in retrospect, I did not cite a lot of what people on the evolution side of the debate say. And the reason for that was because I hadn't really read what the people on the evolution side of the debate had to say. And so I think I, put forward an opinion, a firm one that I wasn't really entitled to have at that time. And so kind of that's something I've become a little more self-aware of, is that I'm drawn to having strong opinions on issues often before I'm entitled to have them. And so I want to improve the quality of the research that I do, study the other side better, study the best that the other side has to offer on these sorts of issues. And I think that will help me to, be more intellectually honest, but then also just to be more productive that in conversations where people feel like I've understood them, and that, that they will know that the person, they do understand where I'm coming from. So, yeah.
Right on. CJ.
No, I was just going to say, to be fair, David has, I think he's reading Graham Oppy right now. So he has definitely read a lot of opposition literature, which is always a positive thing. I guess for me, it would just be being more intentional. This applies more to one-on-one conversations, not so much public ones, but being more intentional, because I feel like when you do this a lot, like that's all you talk about is apologetics and theology, but it's like also just having a social life which I know some people just don't have within the apologetics community. But like other than that, like, you know, just go to a movie or something sometime, or just hang out and have like a game night or something. I don't know. Of course, it depends on the person and the relationship, but I think just having times where you're just genuinely being their friend and caring about them as a person, and you don't constantly have this impression towards them of saying like, I'm just here to save your soul, and then, you know, once you're saved, I have no I'm not just knocking on your door to drop by. Like it should be a genuine care about the person. So I think certainly reading up on research is good too. So I think you can do both, but I wouldn't get so obsessed with research that's like all you ever care about in terms of evangelism and apologetics.
Right on, right on. Well, David, this is it, man. This is the end of our show, and this is your last one with us. So anything else that you want to say to the audience?
Well, I just want to say I've enjoyed it. You know, the time here, it's been great. Learned a lot. It's been, you know, particularly I think the highlights were, of course, having interviews with people like Hugh Ross and J. Warner Wallace, Gary Habermas, people that were like hugely influential for me when I began my journey into kind of theology and apologetics and just thinking more critically about things. Kind of getting to have conversations with those guys who just had been, you know, so almost like fathers to me, and it was great to be able to just, you know, get to talk to them. It's something that I had never thought that I would be able to do, and so I would have to say that's the highlight. But also, you know, it's been great becoming friends with you, becoming friends with Jordan, Caleb. I was friends with you before you came on the show, but getting to, you know, talk with you more here has been great. And so no, I mean, I've loved it. It's awesome, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys do great things here without me.
For the record, I actually wouldn't be on the show if it wasn't for David, because he, I believe, was the first person to ask me to come on the show to do a debate. And I was like, yeah, sure. So that was my first time on the show, and I kind of just stuck around like a house guest at a party for the weekend and never left. So that's essentially the relationship right now.
Well,
so I have to thank for that.
Yeah, I also want to give a shout out to Questioning Christianity. Charles, thanks for being here. I mean, great conversation. We have to rein it. Too bad we have to rein it in at some point. I think we could probably talk about this for another hour and a half. I mean, we're hitting the hour and 20 right now. So yeah, thanks to you and your ministry. We you know, I love y'all's stuff too, man. So it's pretty cool.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Pleasure to be here for sure.
All right. So yeah, guys, check out Questioning Christianity. It's a great show. Also, Real Seekers Ministries. Dale, man, it's always a pleasure to have you here. You're like my brother from another mother in another country.
There you go. And another culture, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah. No, I always love being on your show and working with you. As I said, make a great team.
Yes, sir. And guys, you know, out there, you know, my analytics show that there's a lot of people watching, but not a lot of people subscribing. So I just put that little banner up so you guys could take a look at it. Again, we are doing a name change and a emblem change. So, you know, like I said, NT Wright got on us about our name being a mouthful one time. So, you know, I'm looking for some change here. So, yeah, if you guys want to take part in that, my wife, she just got this nice Cricut machine. So yeah, we're making.
My wife got one of those.
Yeah, I'm gonna be making some merchandise. Oh yeah, man, I'm gonna be making some merchandise. You know, so I'm gonna be making some shirts and hats and stuff. So mugs even. So I'll be able to do some cool stuff with that.
Good,
so. Yeah, there'll be a prize for whoever comes up with the coolest idea. So if you guys
comment down below of what you think our name should be if you're watching.
Yeah, absolutely. Or just send me an email. It's on the about section of the front page. I kind of organized the page a little bit better so you guys can navigate through it a little better. But yeah, you could see me this Monday as well on Tom Jump's channel. David, did you take up Tom on his offer?
Nope, I am not interested in debating Tom Jump at this time. But good luck.
Well, but you know, he's not asking for a debate. He's just asking for a conversation. So
a conversation with Tom Jump is going to turn into a debate. You're not going to have a conversation with Tom Jump. I refuse to believe that that's going to happen.
Well, you'll see me there Monday. I'm gonna join him and just hang out with him, and I'm gonna try to bring up rock climbing too. So
Out of curiosity, did you guys settle on the topic? Because I know you were asking me.
Yeah. I'm gonna keep it just pretty general. I think I told him let's just keep it pretty general. So
Okay.
We'll see how it goes, man. So
maybe you'll be the one to convert him. It's only all the professional philosophers and the hundreds of people on the show, but you'll be the one. You'll be the one, Dave.
Right? Yeah, not even close. I already told him, like, dude, if I'm here, you're way up here when it comes to debating people. So, but yeah. So, anyways, guys, again, I thank everybody for coming on, and for just one last time, I wanted to do this for David.